All right. So today we are finishing up this round of studying Daniel. I'm not going to say we're done with Daniel, but this round of looking at Daniel, we're going to be wrapping up today. So we're going to look at a bit of chapter 11, kind of go over some stuff that I talked about last time, a little bit, expound on something that I talked about last time, and then go into chapter 12. This book, I've been trying to always talk about this book as a whole, from chapter 1 to chapter 12. It's a whole book. It was put together by God and an author for a purpose to hear. And here we're at the end. And often when you're at the end, they're a little more clear about what they want you to take away. And I think Daniel here is pretty clear about what he wants us to take away. And I hope that that's what we hear. So the title of my message is Persecution and Hope. I hope that gives a little sense of what I think Daniel actually means for us to hear. So we're going to read two sections. I'm going to read two sections right now. The first is chapter 11, 31 to 35. And then I'm going to drop down to chapter 12 and read all of chapter 12. All right? So here we go. Make sure I'm in the right place. Yep. Forces from him will arise, desecrate the sanctuary fortress, and do away with the regular sacrifice, and they will set up the abomination of desolation. By smooth words, he will turn to godlessness those who act wickedly toward the covenant. But the people who know their God will display strength and take action. Those who have insight among the people will give understanding to many, yet they will fall by sword and by flame, by captivity and by plunder for many days. Now when they fall, they will be granted a little help, and when they join, and many will join with them in hypocrisy. Some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the end time, because it is still to come at the appointed time. So now 12:1. Now at that time, Michael, the great prince, who stands guard over the sons of your people, will arise, and there will be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone who is found written in the book, will be rescued. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake, these to everlasting life, but the others to disgrace and everlasting contempt. Those who have insight will shine brightly like the brightness of the expanse of heaven, and those who lead the many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But as for you, Daniel, conceal these words and seal up the book until the end of time. Many will go back and forth, and knowledge will increase. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, two others were standing, one on this bank of the river, and the other on that bank of the river. And one said to the man dressed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, "How long will it be until the end of these wonders?" I heard the man dressed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, as he raised his right hand and his left toward heaven, and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and half a time. And as soon as they finish shattering the power of the holy people, all these events will be completed. As for me, I heard, but could not understand. So I said, "My Lord, what will be the outcome of these events?" He said, "Go your way, Daniel, for these words are concealed and sealed up until the end of time. Many will be purged, purified, and refined, but the wicked will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand, but those who have insight will understand. From the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. How blessed is he who keeps writing and attains to the 1,335 days. But as for you, go your way to the end. Then you will enter into rest and rise again for your allotted portion at the end of the age. Okay, so we're just going to jump in. All right, so the first section, the section that I read in chapter 11, verses 31 to 35, I just kind of picked those out. I mean, there's a lot of places that I could have gone with these for what I'm talking about here, but I'm picking these out because we can see in this section three things about persecution, okay? We can see three things about persecution because what we see here is a picture of persecution happening. You know, the king, the forces will arise, desecrate the sanctuary. By smooth words, the king will do wickedly. So there's all this stuff happening, and there is persecution. And this section, remember that Daniel has been asking. The whole reason for this response is that he was asking to understand why Israel, the remnant, had gone back to Israel and yet was not able to rebuild the temple. And so we're seeing that even though the temple will be rebuilt, the vision says it will be rebuilt, but that's not the end. There's still, even after that, there's going to be times when that temple is desecrated. There's going to be times when the sacrifices are stopped. Like, this is not the end. Like, this is an end, but there's going to be other ends, and don't expect persecution to just be done. That's persecution is part of the deal. The people of God will suffer. That is what is put out here. The people of God will suffer. So that means Israel, and in the particular case that we're talking about here in history, but it also means us. We will also suffer. And it's not a sign that we're doing something wrong. It's sometimes it is. Like Israel is in exile because they refuse to do what God said. But in this case that the messenger is telling Daniel about, there's no indication that Israel did anything wrong here. It's just they got in the way of political powers. And they were worshiping God, and people didn't want them to worship God, and they stopped it. So persecution is undeserved suffering. So this is not something that they deserved. This is undeserved suffering. It's the suffering of the weak at the hands of the powerful. What is going on here? We have people who are living in a place, and this king comes rattling in with his armies, and he has power, and he is persecuting the weak. The weak. The weak are persecuted because of what they hold to be true. Verse 32 specifically says that there's this king who's coming in, and his power is so great that he can use soothing words. But what is the actual persecution? It's that the godlessness, he will turn to godlessness, those who were holding on to the covenant. The persecution is meant to turn us away from God. The persecution of the powerful of us is to turn us from God. And that is the definition of that. And we see that all the way through Daniel, right? The book of Daniel just has story after story. Daniel 1, Daniel and his friends are encouraged to reject their God by being educated, by serving the king, by changing their diet. All those things are called. They are called, that is a persecution. The power is being used to coerce them to let go of their God. In Daniel 3, we have Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They have to stand for God in the face of the fiery furnace. They are called to give up their God and to worship this idol or face the consequences of the fiery furnace. In Daniel 6, we have Daniel who has to resist the king's decree not to pray to anyone at risk of being thrown into the lion's den. These are persecutions, and what is common for all these persecutions is someone in power is coercing someone who's not in power to give up their worship of God. That's what persecution is. Persecution is not a backlash to someone wielding power. Persecution is not just either side of a power struggle going on. Persecution is the powerful taking advantage of the weak and trying to get them to give up God. That is what persecution is. Look in Daniel, so I'm going to turn to Matthew 5, verses 11 and 12. This is the Beatitudes. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me, Jesus. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So look in that. In Matthew 5, he's saying persecution is false. It's falsely, it's not true. The persecution is not deserved. Persecution is undeserved suffering. It's undeserved. They are falsely accusing you because of Jesus. And to hold on to Jesus or to hold on to God causes more persecution to come, causes more suffering to come. Well, then that is what persecution is. That is what persecution is. And yeah, I'm gonna keep moving. All right. So the second thing we see in persecution here is that the suffering can divide God's people. The suffering can divide God's people. This persecution can cause God's people to divide. We see that in verse 32. We have the smooth words are causing some to be godless, but the people who know their God will display strength and take action, right? So we have two groups. This king, powerful king, comes in to coerce, and part of them go to godlessness, and part of them stay firm. That is a nature of persecution. That is the nature of the suffering. And the people who sided with the king, who sided with the power, they were not persecuted, but they were also godless. They had also given in to the persecution. So the people who we see the effects of the others, they were killed by sword and by flame and by captivity and by plunder for many days. So the people who did not acquiesce to the power, did not acquiesce to the king, they were killed. So that's not the way we normally think about it. We think about it in the terms of the exile. If you were exiled, you must have done something wrong. But this is saying it actually looks worse for the people who stand, because persecution is about turning you from God. And if you turn from God, you're not going to be persecuted anymore because it was successful. And so we need to keep looking for suffering. We need to look for suffering, not because we caused it, because we tried to power over someone, but because we just are holding on to God and the powerful are trying to coerce us. That is persecution. Third thing we learn about it is that suffering and persecution has a limit. It's not actually in this particular section, although it does say, in 35 it says, some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the end time, because it is still to come at the appointed time. There is an appointed time when it will end. And more in chapter 12, verse 1, we see three times. Now at that time, until that time. We see three times that this is saying the persecution is limited. It's not limited in what they do to you. It's limited in time. God is in charge. He can bring things about. And it repeats it three times. And then it says, finally, at the end of verse 1, it says, at that time, your people, Daniel's people, everyone who is found written in the book will be rescued. So persecution is limited. Doesn't mean that some people didn't die. It means that there is an end and the people will be rescued. They will be rescued. But what about the people who did die? What hope do they have? Is that it? Well, then we get verses 2 to 4 of chapter 12. Here we see what is the hope of those who died. What is the hope of those who died in persecution? And what is the hope of those who just die, like Daniel? We assume that he just died of old age, but what is that? And so in so we know that people died. We already did that. But verse 2 says, this is the most personal and clear hope that people who can sleep are going to be awakened. Okay? So we, as Christians, we have the Old Testament, or we have the New Testament, and we see resurrection. And so we often in the Old Testament will read back into the Old Testament a bunch of stuff about resurrection. But this is the clearest and only place that it says that you will wake up. There are other places that says that you will be vindicated after you're dead, but it doesn't say anything like you can be vindicated after you're dead and not be risen. We read that in there, and I think it's true to read that in there. But the people that Daniel's speaking to, this is I'm saying this because this is such a clear message of hope to Daniel. This is the first time Daniel is like in pain, and here this messenger says, you are going to die and you will be woken up. You will come back. You will be resurrected. It doesn't actually say that, but we get the gist. Like, those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake. If sleep is like parallel to death, then awake is parallel to live, or to living, right? So there, and then it says that's not the total picture, right? Because those to everlasting light. Who's the those? Well, if you go to verse 1, it's those found in the book, those whose names are found in the book. Those will be risen to eternal life, and the others to disgrace and everlasting contempt. Everlasting contempt. That's bad. Like, that is like people just despise you forever. Okay. And then, so I've already said that there's many places in the New Testament where that's true, that there'll be rewards after death. Like, we have lots of stories. Even in the New Testament, we have the story of, we have a picture of that in the story of Lazarus and the rich man, right? So they're in the chasm. Lazarus is receiving his rest, but he's still dead, right? This is saying, yes, and if you're written in the book of life, you will be risen again to eternal life. Okay? So this is a very clear picture of that. And this is the first that I could be wrong, but Daniel is in mourning and mourned for 21 days. And this is the answer. Don't worry. You personally will be risen again. I'll just raise one of the other Old Testament ones. So you have Ezekiel and the vision of the valley of bones, and those bones come back to life. It's not clear in the Ezekiel vision if those bones come back to life and they're who they used to be. That's not there. It's as a whole they're brought back to life. And God can bring new people to life, like God created out of. So it's not clear there, but this actually says those who fall asleep will be risen again, will be awakened. Okay, I think I've belabored that long enough. So this is this picture that he gets, and then that's the end of the vision. Let me hold on just a second. I scrolled too far. Okay, yeah, one other thing I wanted to say here. So 2 to 4, you'll see that he talks about it, and it kind of goes into a little bit of detail, like they'll be till everlasting life, for to disgrace and eternal contempt. And then 3 talks about those who have insight will shine brightly like the brightness of the expanse of heaven, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. Like it kind of gives us like maybe there's different ways that you're going to be rewarded, and people get into all sorts of trouble. But what does it say in 4? It says, but as for you, Daniel, conceal these words. Like I think the messenger actually told Daniel how all this stuff was going to work. And then he says, you know what? Don't write that down. Hide that. Like the messenger is intentionally not telling us all the details about what happens after we're raised from the dead. And maybe he told Daniel, but then he told Daniel, you know what? Don't write that down. And so this is meant, as it's written here, it's meant to be hopeful. It's not to be like, how's that going to work? Or what does that mean? Or is there different things? It's just, if you fall asleep, you will be risen again. And if you're written in the book of life, you will have eternal life. What more do we need to know? And Daniel is told, people will come and go. They'll know different things. Just don't write this down, okay? So then that's not the only time he says that to Daniel, but that's basically the end. So that is the end of the message that he gives. This whole message that the messenger comes and gives a message that ends with, if you die, you will be raised again, and you can go to eternal life. This message of hope, that's where it ends. And then we get the vision kind of transitions to this new bit. And the new bit is there's a couple more people, and the visitors now standing over the water, and these people are starting to ask, we get 2 questions that are asked. And the question is, how long will it be until the end of these wonders? And the response is, I have to say, mysterious. We have times and days and like thousands of days. It's pretty mysterious. What's not mysterious? What's not mysterious? What's not mysterious is, sorry, I have to find my place here. Yeah, in verse 7, just what's not mysterious is times and a half a time and all this stuff. But at the end of 7, it says, as soon as they finish shattering the power of the holy people, all these events will be completed. There's mystery about when it might happen, but there is no mystery about this is going to happen and it's going to get finished. There is no mystery there. And in fact, the next thing that he says, Daniel says, is, as for me, I heard, but I could not understand. Right? I heard, but I could not understand. This is Daniel. He's the one writing it down. He didn't understand. And I think that sometimes we think, well, maybe he understand later. But don't you think if he understood later, he would have come back and adjusted? I don't think that he ever understood when he was alive. I think this is his final word. I heard and I didn't understand. And so that's okay for us too. He just heard times and days and all this stuff, and he's like, I don't understand. And that's okay. It's okay for us to not understand. Daniel didn't understand. But what did he understand? So he didn't understand all the details, but what did he understand? And what he did understand, well, and then it says he didn't understand, my Lord, what will be the outcome of those events? So yes, it's going to be completed. What will be the outcome? And then we hear, again, we get another set of days. But the answer to his question of how will I know, the messenger says, go on your way. And I don't think that's just for Daniel. That's for us too. Go on your way. That's not dismissive. It's not a dismissive go on your way. Get lost. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, go on your way, for these words are concealed and sealed up until the end of time. Go on your way doing what? What are we supposed to go on our way doing? We're supposed to go on our way doing what God gives us to do, right? God is about this stuff, and he's just given this vision saying, yeah, it's happening, and it's going to be completed. You have a part to play. Go on your way. Do the part that God gave you. God is always clear about what you're called to do. That's my experience, at least. God is always clear. If you're unclear, well, maybe you're not supposed to do it, A. And if it's unclear, maybe you'll get it later, whatever. But I'm sure there's something that's clear. My experience again. There's something that's clear to me that I need to do. And I can look over there and say, well, I don't know what I should do because I don't understand that, because I'm ignoring the thing over here that I do know that I'm supposed to be doing. And this go on your way is go do what you're called to do. And then it ends. The final verse is really the kicker, the blessing, if you will. It's a benediction. The go on your way is almost a go in peace, go with God's grace, right? That is what's here, and we see that in verse 13. But as for you, go on your way to the end. Go to the end. Don't turn away from the end. Go to the end. Then you will enter into rest and rise again for your allotted portion at the end of the age. That is where Daniel ends his book. There's going to be persecution. There's going to be stuff going on. As for you, go on your way. Go with God's grace. Know that you will enter your rest. You will be raised again, and you will receive your allotted portion at the end. Isn't that just, I find that relieving. Daniel doesn't understand. He asks a little bit more. The messenger says, you don't need to understand. You just need to do what you're called to do. Go on your way. Go on your way. Enter into rest. Rise again for your allotted portion at the end of the age. That's our call. That's what we're told to do. It's a command. It's a suggestion, it's a grace, and it's a command. Go on your way. Do what God has in front of you. Know that the end is in secure hands with God. You don't need to worry about it. You don't need to understand it. Maybe you will. Maybe you won't. Doesn't matter. There will be things that you understand. This is God's gracious word to us today. And